Recording in progress.
Yes, I guess that all of you can listen and see the screen as well.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Recording in
Okay. So I guess let's start. There are too many chats. Your voice is not clear, audio is clear, not clear. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, fine. I'm sorry things are happening. I'm not happy with this. But okay, fine. Let's start. Need to be very fast now. We were very slow. Now the point is that you are now moving in a very high dimensional space. If I say that a high dimensional space, what does that mean? Is that you may be having 2 dimension, you may be having 3, you may be having 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, or whatever. But the point is that in that space where you wanted to move, you wanted to move over the curve. Why? Because you wanted to somehow minimize that function. Okay, so there is someone who can help you to move in the correct direction. When I say direction, it has to be a vector. What vector? If it is 3 dimension, then it's going to be a 3-dimensional vector. If it is 5 dimensions, then it's going to be a 5-dimensional vector. So the point is that if you have a high dimensional space and wanted to optimize a function which is actually a multi-dimensional function, something which we have shown somewhere over here, how can you move? You need to know 2 things. Not even, if I say that the 2 things is, first is that where you are and what is the derivative direction. And you just need to move in the reverse direction of that derivative, but not very fast, because this derivative may be very high. And if it is very high, then what will happen, that if you are at this location, you wanted to gradually go in that direction. If you are very fast, then you will not be in a position to stop over here and keep on oscillating. So if you have one variable like W1, other one W2, third one W3, W1, W4, W5, W6, and so on, you just get this derivative del F by del W1, W2, W3, W4, and 5, because your F, your whatever the function over which you are actually trying to work on, your F is nothing but a function of, say, W1, W2, and so on. So if I say that find out the derivative, you are going to have all these derivatives. You take all of them one by one, multiply it with neta, that's your learning rate, and just subtract it from your actual location of that W1. And that is going to give you the new thing. Why this is working, that is, by the way, it's called as the gradient descent, and that is, the stochastic version is also being there. But this is the gradient descent, and if you use this gradient descent, you can search the best possible set of values, if I say that the parameters which are going to minimize the given function F. Okay. Now the point is that several times it may happen.
Just one question. Why do we deal with partial derivatives here? Partial?
Yes, why partial? The point is that what is the meaning of a partial derivative? Now just to see that this is your washing machine, and you are having knob number 1, knob number 2, knob number 3, knob number 4, knob number 5, knob number 6. This is your
Okay.
knob number 1, X1, X2, X3, X4, X5, and X6. And here is your output. Your machine is working or not, started to spin or whatever the thing that you want. Clear? Now you want to find out dy by dx. So if you wanted to find out dy by dx1, you are only changing this, keeping all of them constant.
Yes, yes.
That is partial derivative. Okay.
Okay.
This is partial derivative. What does it mean? So if I have, x1 square plus x2, I wanted to find out its derivative with respect to x1, partial derivative. What does that mean? Assume this to be constant. Now, if it is constant, forget, because its derivative is not going to be, it's going to be 0, its derivative. So you only differentiate this guy. You are going to get 2 times x1. Is that clear? Partial derivative?
Yeah. So in the other case, when you are doing it for finding out eta into partial derivative with respect to W1, a rest is 0. Is that what we imply?
Rest is not used. Derivatives for because when you use W1, all these Wi's except I are being constant. And if you differentiate everything, then all of them will actually be 0. Their derivatives will be 0. Only this derivative will be active.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Aditya sir,
Yes.
one more
Yes.
doubt. Why it is
Yeah.
called closed form?
Yeah, it is called,
Ah.
till now it is called closed form because your f was actually x square, x cube, or some function that you can easily find out the derivative. But now what will happen, that your function is no more a closed form. I am just giving you a black box function for which values, or this formula is not known. Then how you can find out this? You
Okay.
need to find out this thing. And if I tell that your function is W1 square plus W2, then
Okay.
first derivative is going to be this value will be actually 2 times W1.
Yes.
But this formula is not known now.
Okay. So since this is not known, this is form closed form.
This is not closed form now because it is
Oh, this
not
is
known.
not closed. Okay. This is
Yes.
not closed form. It is open.
Yes, open. So if I say that if this function f is not formally defined in terms of formula, your next question will be, sir, okay, you have given me this formula. Now, can you tell me how can I find out this? And that is your next thing, that analytically computing the gradients. How can we compute the gradients analytically using your neighborhood values? Okay, that is the thing. Yes. So the next step is analytically, how can we compute the gradient? This is the formula we all know. And if I make this h is equal to 1, then if you move in this direction, if you are moving in this direction and you wanted to find out derivative at this location, you just take this value and this value and you can subtract. You can take this value and this value and then you can subtract. So you just take the neighborhood values and subtract. That is going to give you the derivative. You only require derivative in some direction. So in that direction, you go into the neighborhood locality and find out the difference. And that is the first order derivative for you. And that is the way, because most of the time, you will not be in a position to compute these values. And you need to compute the gradients analytically. Okay. Hence, in that high dimensional space, if I say n dimension, and n can be typically very big, 5, 10, 50, 20, 100, thousands, and so on, then in n directional space, you wanted to move on, and we are searching for some optimal set of parameters W star that we can minimize over a particular function f. I want that W which will minimize my f. How can I do that? Initialize your W with some random values, n random values, because your W is actually W1, W2, and Wn, n random values. Yes, somebody was asking.
Prof,
Okay,
do
no.
we always minimize, or is it dependent on case by case basis, or is it always minimize?
Yeah. See, if it is a maximizing function, then we always take its negative and minimize.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we initialize this with some random value, And then for each and every dimension, well, how we are moving wi old plus delta times w, but here your delta times w is actually this. So if you have, w1, w2 and w3, then you are going to have delta w1, delta w2 and delta w3, and your new w1 is going to be equal to w1 minus neta times delta w1. And similarly, you will get W2 update, W3 update, and W4 update, and you are going to have all possible updates. You keep on moving. Up to what time you are moving? You keep on moving in such a way so that you started to converge. If your weight vector started to move drastically, then you keep on moving, and at some point of time, you will see that your weights W1, W2, W3, now they are not moving much, which means that, okay, you actually have reached to your minima. You are here, then you will be taken over here, then here, then here, then here. Sometimes you may overshoot and then you keep on coming here. If your learning rate is very high, you may go up to this. You keep on oscillating. If your learning rate is very low, then it will start to take huge amount of time to converge because you are driving very slow, very slow, very slow, very slow. So you are not able to converge well. Yes. Then there are actually two things that I wanted to let you understand, and then we will specify formally the problem of binary classification. In fact, all these things are being shown to you previously. I just wanted to lay a complete foundation for this. This is your x1, x2, and x3 data space. So now understand that there is some data and there is some parameters, and just remember wt x equal to 0 is nothing but actually the equation of a line. If it is 2D, if it is 3D, if your x is 1, x1 and x2, then it's going to be a line. If it is 1, x1, x2 and x3, then it is going to be a plane. And if it is more than that, it's going to be a hyperplane. Right now we are having 3 dimensions, x1, x2 and x3. This is my data. All my points are actually being here. Okay. And if I take something like this, any plane, that plane can actually be represented like this. No issues, we have already seen. And if your plane is actually being seen like this, now I'm plotting another space. This is a parametric space where we are having W1, W2 and W3. 3 things are there. W1, W2, W3. 3 things are there. What are these 3 things? These are the weights. Okay. If I take a point over here, if I take this point and try to see it over here, what does it look like? Can anyone tell? If I take a point over here and try to see it over here, how does it look like?
It will still be a point, right?
It's a point over here, but not a point over here. It's actually a point over here. What it's going to be seen over here?
Line.
It's a point.
It's a plane. It's a plane. Yeah, it's a plane. It's actually a plane over here, na? Say W1, W2, W3. If I change that, then right now this is the plane. Next plane will be something like this. If I change it again, next plane will be something like this. So if I take some point over here, some point over here, some point, any point over here, this is nothing but a plane over here. Yes, that's the thing. Now what you want? When we understand, and again I'm reiterating, please, if you're not able to understand, please ask. This is my x1, x2, x3. This is my data space where my data is lying. All my points are here, x1, x2, x3. All my points are actually over here. Maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, and so on. If I take a point over here and see it over here, it's actually a plane. If I take another point over here, that's a different plane. If I take something over here, it's a third different plane. You are having infinite amount of planes. If this thing is clear, which means that plane over here is actually a point over here. Point over here is actually a plane over here. Clear? Okay. Clear. Okay. Problem of binary classification.
Sir, how does it help us in any way, this conversion?
Soon you will understand. Don't
Okay,
worry.
okay.
Problem of binary classification. Problem of my binary classification mean to say that I am having huge amount of persons. They are standing in front of me. All of you are standing in front of us. 1000 persons have applied for two things. Maybe to join my research group and do research with me, or maybe they wanted to play cricket and they wanted to be in my cricket team. These are two different objectives. All of them are actually applying for this. What I wanted to tell you is for the first time, I'm now going to relate it with the machine learning. First thing is that you need to understand that as a student, as a data point, I wanted to, being a classifier, I wanted to see that whether I'm going to select you for my research group or not. So being a person, let us take some person. How can I take? I can take like, Anish. Anish, can you listen? Anish.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Anish. So I just wanted to, talk to you for few questions I'm going to ask. Now, it's
Sure.
not a question, it's just a conversation, right? Conversation. So
Okay.
Anish, what I want is that, by the way, are you faculty member?
No.
No, then it's okay. Huh? So Anish, what I wanted to do is that, you wanted to apply for my research group. Okay. So
Okay.
being a student, you are having infinite amount of information. You are a data point for me, single data point, and I'm having infinite amount of information in you. Let me tell you what are that information. My single data point like Anish Bose is having infinite amount of information like his name, like his gender, like his high school percentage, like his mathematical background, like his father's name, like his mother's name, like his sister's name, like the way in which he are sitting right now, like the way in which room he is sitting, like the type of whether he wears specs or not, how big his hairs are, how many language does this guy know. So you understand that a single data point can have infinite amount of information. Anish, is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. So the point is that so many information, infinite amount of informations, and when you apply to my research group, I don't ask that many questions in that interview form or written form, whichever you are submitting. We may ask few questions: name, mobile, qualification, gender, something. Okay, fine. So how many attributes are going to be considered and what are those? They are very important, but they are related to the objective in which I'm interested in. Because these things will change. I may ask whether you know Python, I may ask whether you know differential calculus, programming, this, that, and so on. And as soon as I say that, no, I'm interested in my cricket team. And then you will say that my questions are completely going to be changed. I may ask, hey, are you a batsman? Are you a bowler? Are you able to do this? Are you able to do that? And so on. So actual data. Thank you, Anish. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. So actually my data is having infinite amount of information like this. And the central question is that during the interview, what type of questions I need to ask? And then how much amount of weightage each question is going to have. It may be that each question is going to have different weight. Yes, in exam you can see that, right? Some questions are very easy, some questions are difficult, and each of them is going to have different weights. So if I have A, for my A objective, I may ask this and this and so on. For case B, I may ask other things. And then it's called as a feature selection. One can observe that questions that we need to ask are depending upon the objective and the task in my hand. What is the problem that I wanted to solve? And depending upon that, my questions are actually going to be drafted. And this is actually called as the feature engineering, by the way. And huge amount of time was actually being spent previously in the pre-deep learning era. In case of machine learning, you have two separate things. One is you give me the best possible features, and the other one is Give me any features, I am going to do classification for you. So one engine has to be there, or algorithm has to be there, which is going to give you the features, and the other is going to give you the other things are going to give you the classification, the best possible classification for you. So now, during the interview, I am going to ask all the applicants several things. Yes. So depending upon that, what is the output that I'm going to get? They are actually being called as the features. I'm going to accept or reject based upon certain criteria, and that is called as the the classification decision. Now suppose that this is all of you who have applied. Green guys are selected and red guys are rejected. Out of 1,000, 100 got selected, 900 got rejected. Can we learn what this guy like Aditya Nigam, what this guy was actually looking for task A or maybe task B? I will ask two set of questions, and what the output that you have given for these questions, you can somehow define or decide that what this guy Aditya Nigam was actually looking for. Can you come up with that classification rule that I was actually trying to do? Okay. So given this guy, I ask all the questions, and these are all the answers. And now you see that being an infinite amount of data in a single data element like Anis Bose, he is actually being projected into some n-dimensional space where this single point, this data, which is having infinite amount of information, is actually being represented as a single point. If I plot this point x1 to xn in an n-dimensional space, you are going to get a single point over there. Fine. So basically, each and every data that we have is going to be projected in that n-dimensional space. And your data is actually now becoming an n-dimensional vector. I just have shown your data becomes an n-dimensional vector. And in that ND space, you can see your points like this. Now the question is that if you ask proper questions, if you ask arbit questions, then in that n-dimensional space, selected and rejected guys may be intermixed. If I ask proper questions, selected and rejected guys are actually going to have a proper separation. Okay, these are the selected, these may be the rejected. Maybe this is the class 1, maybe this is the class 2. We need to ask relevant questions. Suppose that I ask 128 questions, then each and every data got converted into a 128 dimensional vector. If I ask 256 questions, then each and every data got projected into 256 dimensional vector. And why you wanted to ask more questions or less questions, it depends that how complex is your problem. If you wanted to differentiate between cat and dog, you wanted to differentiate between very similar cat and very similar dog, you wanted to differentiate between male and female, you wanted to differentiate between anomalous and proper behavior, it depends upon that how complex is your problem, and depending upon the complexity of your problem, you need to ask questions. So what is feature extraction is nothing but we need to ask relevant questions so as to project these data points in such a way that in that projected space, accepted and rejected candidates need to be as far apart as possible. Which means that suppose that it's a two-dimensional space, I wanted to have my points being well separated. This is first part. And once you have got your points well separated, I wanted to get a line or a hyperplane or a plane or hyperplane or line or whatever that can separate these two classes. Now you can relate that if this is your data space, I am looking for some W vector that can differentiate between both of these. Now you can understand that one single neuron, if you take, it can differentiate. If you know this line is there, and if I tell you the value of this line, it's nothing but W1 x1 plus W2 x2 plus W0 equal to 0, and all the points which are here, they need to be at one side. All the points which are here, they need to be on the other side. And we need to fix up and come up with a line. This can also be a line. This can also be a line. Probably we may start from here because these line weights are randomly initialized. And we need to get the best possible line. You may keep on going like this, and at some point you end up this. How you are changing your WIs? WI is going to be changed as the delta WI you can compute, and your delta WI is going to tell you that what is your WI going to be. WI is equal to WI minus neta times delta WI. So your weights are keep on changing. And you wanted to come up with the best possible classification. Okay. Now here it comes that ML to DL, somebody was asking previously. So if I have, a problem, any problem is going to be defined over some data D. Some data I have, and your problem is actually defined over D. And we divide that data into training data as well as the testing data. Training is also having some sort of validation. And over that, first I need to come up with some feature extraction algorithm that will extract features. Now, what is that? You just take that infinite amount of data, and we will not be taking all of this. We started to ask very specific question, maybe n questions, and now this single data got projected into that n-dimensional space. What can be those questions? They are actually coming from these domain, image processing and computer vision. And a huge amount of work is actually being done for feature extraction in predefined or if I say pre-deep learning era, in which they used to ask different questions to each and every image or the data or whatever, so as to get the best possible features. And now your each and every point is nothing but a vector. And now you have got your features for each and every data. Now there is another thing which is called as machine learning. So if you start with Duda Hart, the very popular machine learning book, or Bishop, all of them actually say that my data is X, which is nothing but X1, X2 to Xn, n-dimensional vector. They don't even bother about that. What are these dimensions? How you have got that? Because classification used to say that give me the best feature, I am going to give you the best possible classification. And then they come up with huge amount of different algorithms in machine learning, like Bayesian classification, like Gaussian mixture model, like hidden Markov model, like support vector machines, like neural networks. It's also a type of machine learning algorithm. There are so many different types of machine learning algorithms. They all can be used to do classification for you given these type of feature vectors. And then that's a traditional machine learning. Given this set of features, classifier is actually being trained, random forest, this and that. Finally, classification scores are being obtained. And that is a traditional machine learning for you, which will say classification is not working well. Then classifier will say, hey, you have not given me the best possible feature. And when this guy will say your features, then this feature guy will say that, hey, my features are the best. Maybe your classification algorithm is not perfect. And then both of these guys keep on tweaking. One guy is working over here, other guy is working over there. And they keep on tweaking between them so as to get the best possible output. Now, similar to the above mentioned function of optimization, we just have seen in multidimensional function optimization, that how can we search for the best hyperplane in that feature space. Now you can relate that this is the data, and I am having huge amount of such data, and if I plot it like this, then all this data is something like this. I wanted to come up with the best possible hyperplane that can differentiate or take all the one class point to one side and other class point to another side. Basically, we want this. And now somebody was asking that how this thing was related here. Now you can see that we are searching over here. This is one hyperplane, this is another hyperplane, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. You wanted to, so randomly you got initialized to somewhere, and now you wanted to move or change your hyperplanes in such a way so that if you take that hyperplane, see it over here, it is going to give you a hyperplane, exact hyperplane, and it has to be in such a way so that all the positive points or one class points are at some place and the other class points are to my different side. And that is the optimization that we are actually doing. We are trying to do. We are trying to come up with some, loss function, say f, which is nothing but a function of w1, w2, and w3. And this loss function is nothing but I say that how many points are misclassified, and I wanted to minimize that misclassification rate, and that is nothing but a function of my all the parameters or the parametric space f of w1, w2, and w3. I wanted to minimize it, and it's just a minimization. I just have said the way we have seen the multi-dimensional function optimization, and you start with some randomly off, completely wrong hyperplane, but it keep on updating itself using this type of update rule. And who is going to guarantee that whatever the updates that you are going to do, it is taking it into the correct direction? This is also being proved, that if they are linearly separable, they are going to move in the correct or the probable correct direction. So I guess that relationship is also being set. So we are going to be, what we are going to be is actually a function we are actually trying to minimize with respect to a loss function. It can be the number of errors that we are making. We wanted to keep on reducing it. And how can you take these loss functions? So if it is regression, it can be mean square error. If it is classification, it can be cross entropy. I assume that they are actually being covered in our last day lecture.
Prof, just one question. When you're trying to move that hyperplane around, you don't have any target, right? You're just trying to go with minimization. So there is no target minimization. You just keep minimizing.
Yes. So when we move in this direction like this, so assume that this is your loss function over which you are moving.
Okay.
So there is only target is that you need to move in the minimum where it is.
Okay.
And derivative is going to take you in that direction.
Opposite so only when we move past minimum, we will know that is the true minimum.
Yes. Okay. So if your value is not changing, if your point is not now changing, which means that you have moved. It is just like you take a ball over here, and it will keep on going dig, and it actually stop.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So that's a loss function, maybe for the regression, maybe for the cross entropy, is going to be for the classification. There are actually two types of algorithm, broad level classification things. One is supervised learning, in which you are having these type of loss functions, I have said. So for any given point x, it assumes its correct label is also given to you, and that is called as the ground truth, which means that when I say that selected or rejected was the question in my research group, then if I give you all of the students' data, so that is x. And with respect to that x, I have also given you the y. Y is what? Whether it is accepted or rejected. So now, using the learned logic x, whatever the logic that we have learned, given this x will actually be converted into the predicted y, y dash, and y is actually the ground truth. What we want is that y and y dash need to be as close as possible. So your loss function is actually being defined over y and y hat, how close they are. All these loss functions, MSE or MAE or cross entropy, they are actually being defined over the predicted value and the ground truth, and find out how close they are using different formulas. Yes, so your x is actually going to be converted into your y dash, and this is the function that you are trying to learn. And your regression is essentially nothing but for each and every point, if you know that what is the corresponding, for each and every xi, you know that what is its corresponding yi, then you take your network, give some xi, find out some value, and see that how far it is from the actual ground truth. That is NMSE for you, maybe like this square value. MA is mean average error. So it's actually the mean square error. Mean average error is nothing but this. You just wanted to find out that how far both of these values are, not the square of that. So first thing is called as L2 norm. Second is actually called as the L1 norm. There is one more thing which is coming in between. That is, yi are actually being represented as one hot encoding for classification. What does that mean? Because for regression, you must have seen in your previous lecture that the regression is nothing but you are having a value x and you are having its corresponding value y, and you got the predicted value y hat. You wanted to find out how far both of these guys are and add them and minimize that and find out that theta is nothing but w0, w1, w3 and so on. These are the weight vectors that you are actually looking for, and you minimize it in such a way so as to get the best possible weight vector, which will take any xi and convert it into yi given your data.
Prof, just one question. Is
Yes.
ground truth the label of the raw real data, or is it the real data?
That's the ground truth.
So is it the ground truth, when they imply ground truth, is it the label for the raw data, or is it just equal to raw data?
No, it's the label. So you need to tell that if this, if this is my x, then what is its ground truth? Y. Whether it's male, female, if you have wanted to solve out, or if this, then what I wanted to predict what is its salary. Then for each and every data, you need to know that his salary is 10,000, his salary is 20,000 and so on.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. So for regression, the ground truth is very simple, that, okay, for this data, this is the ground truth, and for this x, this is the y. For classification, how can you fix it out that what is going to be the ground truth? So suppose that I am having 10 classes. If I have 10 classes, then this data belongs to class 1 or class 2 or class 10. I will say that 1, 0, 0, 0, 0 and so on. 10 times 0, 9, 0, and first thing is 1. This is representing class number 1. Class number 2 is 0, 1 and all other things are 0. So if I am having n classes, I am having n dimensional vector, and for this vector I'm having 1, 0, 0, 0 and so on. This is telling for the first class. 0, 1 and so on, that is going to telling me for the second class. 0, 0, 1 and remaining things are 0. That's going to tell that whether it belongs to the third class or not. So basically, one hot encoding is only saying that there is an n-dimensional vector out of which only one location is hot or one location is 1. Remaining locations are 0, and this is going to tell the actual class of that subject or that given data. That's anyways being explained over here. And then so suppose that this is my x, Anish Bose, and for this guy I have asked 3 questions. These are the three questions: x1, x2, x3. What does that mean? This guy x got projected into that three-dimensional space, because I have asked three questions. When it got projected into three-dimensional space, I wanted to learn a function which will take this and convert it into three probabilities, whether he is going to be accepted, not going to be accepted, or maybe accepted or rejected or waitlist. Now, this is actually the three-class problem. I'm going to get three probabilities, and my loss function is actually the cross entropy, which is that I know yi. What is this? This is my ground truth. Y hat, that's my predicted thing. Who is going to predict? My network is going to predict. What is that value? These are the three values. How you are getting your ground truth? That is being given to you from your ground. Basically, in your data itself, it's being given. You have got y. You have got y1 hat. Y is nothing but a one hot encoded, which means that it is 0, 1, 0, which means that it is belonging to the second class. And output is going to be something like this, maybe 0 0.01, 0 0.11, 0 point something. And what you are going to do as a cross entropy, the formula says, I will take this value, I will take the log of this value, multiply both of them, and have a minus sign and add. How? I will take y1 minus log, so it's going to be minus of y1 log y1 dash plus minus of y2 and log y2 dash minus of y3 and log of y3 dash. You add all of these three things, and that is going to tell you that that is the cross entropy between them. If there are only two classes, then the cross entropy is slightly defined in a different way, but that is even okay. We understand that this is the cross entropy formula. What is that formula? Yes.
Is there any specific intention for log, taking log, or any?
Yes, there is a very specific intention, and the point is that it requires so all these things that I am trying to tell, if you want any detailed explanations, they are actually available. We will share you the link from where one full lecture is on cross entropy.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So somebody can also argue that why you are not y1 minus y1 hat and y2 minus y2 dash and so on, and add like MSE.
Yeah.
So there are issues, and for regression, that is why MSE is going to be taken, and for cross entropy is actually been taken for the classification, and there are proofs as well.
Okay, Prof. I'll go through that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So so this is the thing that this graph is also trying to show that your log loss performs well and take you into the correct direction. Now you can see that we are having two spaces. Space number one, that is the input or the feature space, or the points space where all of my data points, any data point is actually being projected over here. I take Anish Bose, he's got projected over here. I take someone else, he's also got projected over here. And here all these projections are there. And then this is my parametric space in which I am having all possible points, and all these points are nothing but the planes over here. And we wanted to find out the best possible plane that can solve our problem. But one can see that one neuron can be used to learn one such hyperplane if our data is linearly separable. And then you can argue that why, but the point is that that is the perceptron algorithm, and it's actually being proved that if your points are linearly separable, what does that mean? That if you have asked very good questions, then you have got these points well separated. And if they are well separated, very simple function, which is essentially a linear function, can separate both of them very easily. And if that is the case, then only one neuron is sufficient. And you must have seen that one neuron learning W0, W1 and W2, if it's learn things properly, it will give you, a classification hyperplane or a line like this, which will, when given to X1 and X2 to this neuron, it will say positive or negative, positive for all yellow, negative for all green. So fire or no fire, somebody was asking, which means that it will say class 1 or class 0. Fine. But one neuron can solve things for you if things are linearly separable. What does that mean? You are having a single line by which you can separate both of them. But then why you require more and more neurons? Because most of the time your boundaries are not linearly separable. And the thing is that I cannot ask that very intrinsic questions by which I can very easily differentiate between my thing. If it is, then that problem is not very difficult, and we are not here to solve simple problems. And most of the time, what is going to happen, that I take you, project you, and once I project, I see that there is some intermingling which is happening. I cannot have a line which can differentiate between my positive and the negative class, my yellow and the green class. You can have data like this, in which one thing is completely inside, other things are completely out. How can you come up with a line that can differentiate between them properly? You can have, things like this, or completely, something like this. It's very, very difficult to, figure out boundaries like this. And that is why you require more and more neurons. Let us stop right now here and ask for some questions. Then we will break, and then I'll give you another intuition of neural networks.
Prof, is
Yes.
there any deterministic example where we do not need to do this? We do not need to go into neurons, any like basically any process which does not need machine learning. Hello? Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Janamjay, what is your question? Can you repeat?
Yeah. I wanted to ask, basically, we are using machine learning, just a generic question, when we have unseen data, right? So is there any deterministic process where we do not need this sort of, where we do not need this algorithm? Any example is there?
Yes. So you can listen to me? Yes?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yes. So the point is that, in fact, in most of the places, your functions are going to be completely out of order. When I say this, there is a function,
Mhm.
you may even ask that, do such type of functions even exist?
Okay.
And then I say that, do you have a linear function? And the clear-cut answer is that most of the time you are not going to have a linear function.
Okay.
And if it's not linear, one neuron is not sufficient.
Okay.
And if one neuron is not sufficient, you require more and more neuron. That is anyways our second topic that we are going to see. But when you say that a clear-cut example, you take any example. If
Okay.
your problem is very, very simple,
Mhm.
very, very simple, let me tell you, you wanted, your objective is to differentiate between male and female.
Okay.
And what I have done is that I have asked only one question to each and every student. Tell me your gender.
Okay.
He will give me male, or female, female. And male
Okay.
is, one side, female is one side. You are getting a linear hyperplane. Thank you, done. Very simple problem.
Okay. Got
Then
it.
you say that you are not allowed to ask this question. Then I will ask certain other things. you know, maybe, you know, slightly gender biased, just please don't take me wrong, but probably I may ask that what color you like, then somebody
Got
will say
it.
yellow, blue, this, they, somebody will say pink, somebody
Got
will
it.
say this. Some girls may also be having, you know, colors which are related to pink or maybe close to pink. Then I will
Understood.
ask another question, you know, so I can ask, you know, what is the size of your hair? So during lockdown, everyone is having, you know, long hairs, even myself.
Got
But
it.
you know, that is also a thing that several times it's actually being used for.
For
So the
stats.
point is that
Yeah.
how, yes, that's true also. Yeah, so that is that what type of objective. So if your objective is very simple, then single neuron or maybe few neurons are okay. But if your
Okay.
objective is complex, you
Okay.
require more and more. Fine.
So even when the task is simple, when you're directly asking the gender, you still need a neuron, right? Because you're still trying to classify based on their answer.
Yes. So asking question is only projecting you to a higher or some dimensional space.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
in that space, you require a classifier. A classifier is nothing but a separating boundary.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So that is a function. That function will ask you, give me your projection. I am going to tell you whether you are to my left or you are to my right.
Okay. 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 Got
Yes,
it. Got it.
neural system is a replica of neural. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Similar to that. Fine. Yeah. So we are okay. And let us have some other questions. If you have, please ask. You are, all of you are open to ask questions. Yes. You can
Aditya,
now.
sir?
Yes.
During the session, you were suggesting something on machine learning. Which was that book that you were suggesting?
That book
Machine.
I was suggesting that were the landmark books, but the better thing is not to, you know, refer them. They are, you know, the core machine learning books, and they require huge amount of, you know, stuff. I can reiterate the name. One is the Duda Hart pattern
Okay.
classification, and other one is pattern recognition, that is Bishop. You just write Bishop or Duda Hart. The whole world is actually reading things from these guys, but they are much more abstract, and you know, they are the, you know, the textbook for pattern recognitions, machine learning and pattern recognition. Yes, others also, you please write, you ask any question. You can directly ask questions now. Which is the discriminant function and decision boundary? What is the difference between discriminant function and the decision boundary? They are same. So the function, I say that it's actually the boundary, and we parameterize that boundary using some function. You have a boundary, India and Pakistan, there is a boundary. So you need to parameterize using some function, but you can say that, oh, it cannot be a linear line. Then you will say that, okay, if I give you three dimensions, can you do that thing? You say, yeah, anyways, it's a three-dimensional thing. But in that three-dimensional thing from space, if you see the boundary, it will, the boundary between India and Pakistan is going to be, you know, very a curved line. Can you figure out that curve? And then I will say, I'm giving you some 50,000 dimensional parameters. And that, and using those parameters, you can somehow, approximate that boundary. Yes, Shankar Tiwari. So we use softmax in the hidden layer also. Yes, softmax is being used, but wait, we will cover that. Don't worry. And that's true that in the last layer we are going to use softmax. Yes. Is we always use cross entropy? No. Cross entropy is one type of function, loss function. For classification, we use cross entropy. But for there are so many different types of functions, type of work that you wanted to do using machine learning, and for that you require different functions. How do we choose? As I have said that you need to read about these functions, that okay, cross entropy is one function, categorical cross entropy is another, binary cross entropy is something else, and then you have so many different types of loss functions. And even for the classification, if I say that for the regression, you need to use MSE or MAE or L1 or L2 type of functions. For classification, you need to choose between cross entropy and the variance of cross entropy, and then their are at least 10 different types of new loss functions, even for the classification. So if people are interested, our lecture is anyways available, but it is slightly, more involved topic. But right now your things are completely okay with the cross entropy if you are doing classification. Sir, when we use MAE, MSE or CE, how is bias variance is affected in loss functions? What we have discussed about the bias, but the variance is also considered. By the way, the point is that the bias of a neuron is different than bias and variance. First thing, bias and variance are two different things, and they are related to the point that when you come up with a solution, how much that solution is biased. Suppose that you are a BJP supporter and you are saying something, then everyone will say that why to listen him, because he is biased towards something. It is similar to when a classification becomes biased towards something. Why? Because it has seen more number of that class features and got influenced by that and moved towards that, and because of that it is behaving or giving decisions which you are considering as a biased. And the variance says that if I change my data, keep on changing my data, sometimes I give you data from India, sometimes I give you data from North India, sometimes I give you data from America, how much amount of variance in your decision your classification function is going to do. So these bias and variance are actually different from the bias that we have talked about of a single neuron. Single neuron bias is that how positive you are when you are going to say that I belong to this class or I don't belong to this class. But yes, this CE and MA and MSc, they all are actually trying to learn a function, and these functions are having a different types of biases and variance, and both of these things need to be properly addressed. Otherwise, what is going to happen is that you perform very well over your given data set, but your generalization will not be good. Yes, someone else can ask.
So your screen is not visible to me.
Yes, screen is anyways not shown. I'm not showing anything. I'm just answering questions. I'm just answering. You can all ask questions. Yeah. So is there any, somebody has again asked, but that I know. Wait. Yeah. Is there any difference between loss, error, objective, and optimization? Okay. So the point is that error is that how much amount of error your network is having, which means that if you belong to class B and my network is saying that you belongs to class A, loss is maybe dependent upon error, maybe not directly dependent upon error, maybe indirectly dependent upon error. That we are going to see in our next lecture. So loss is something that your network is going to reduce or optimize over. So optimization is actually, optimization function is not correct. Optimization of a function, and that function is a loss function. Now objective function is something, it can be it can be that my objective is that to maximize this function or minimize something. So objective function can actually be a loss function or maybe a advantage function as well. So if I say reiterate, errors our network is creating, my loss is going to be dependent upon error, and my network need to optimize over my loss function so as to give me the best possible output. And objective function can be loss function as well as maybe the advantage function. Satyan, why are loss functions called loss functions? Because they are actually trying to estimate the amount of somehow the amount of error your network is making, and that is your loss, because whatever the errors that you are going to make, that is your loss, and you wanted to minimize that. So loss is definitely happening because of your network parameters. So given this type of network parameters over this data set, your network is performing So if you compute the advantage function, it can be, maybe telling you that how well you are performing. When you find out errors, and somehow loss function is dependent upon error several times, maybe directly, most of the time maybe indirectly. That is why it is telling you that, okay, your network is making this many number of errors, and probably this is your loss function. Can you minimize that? Yes. So in cross entropy, you can also see that your error is, 5 points are there, and 4 are properly classified, and 1 is incorrectly classified. So that incorrectly classified, so if I say error, then error is 1. But what is cross entropy loss? I just have shown yi log of yi with a negative sign, and if you add for all of those things, you are going to get a single value.
So sir, I have a basic clarification and as well as a confusion in understanding the loss function. When you said it is with respect to the neuron, I can understand that the bias is associated with each neuron, but when we compute the loss function, it is for the whole network, isn't it, sir? Like,
that's true.
So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so the minimizing the loss function will actually give the network optimization, including all neurons, isn't it, sir?
Yes, that's true. And my answer why it was that, because till now I only have introduced single neuron, so I'm only assuming that your network is having single neuron, but your loss is not even associated to the single neuron. It is for the whole network, which is having huge amount of neurons, and the final layer output is going to determine that what is your final loss.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
And then what exactly is the reason for not choosing MSc in classification is a very good question, Chirag, but it requires more time. You can use, and you will see that, okay, it's not a good choice, and then there are theoretical justifications for this, but amount of time that we have, we cannot cover all things. But if you are interested, I will try to share links. All these things are covered in multiple lectures. They are publicly available, even my lectures. Yes, I will try to share after my class. Okay. I guess Preeti can share in between, my previous years offering. Playlists are there. Preeti, you can share in between my CS671 deep learning course playlist. She will share. Yes, anyone else can ask questions. We are here to open up, all of you to ask questions, so that I can move fearlessly into my second, next lecture. Yes, 11:33. No one is now asking. I assume that things were very simple. You all get understood all those stuff. We are going to start our next session from 11:40. Now I am going to manage my classes according to me, because most of the things are going to be covered by me. So at any logical point when I reach, I will stop over there and assume that it's a one-to-one extempore teaching for you. So whenever you have any question, you can ask. 11:40, we are going to have our session started. Thank you.